Hello and welcome back to the use and abuse of Laura Endicott. This is chapter the 11th, Elysium Enacted, Scene 3. The salon was so large and faced the back porch of the great house overlooking the playing lawns and further out the inner gardens, that even with every last person who lived and worked at Armont present, there was still some space within which others might yet have been present. I counted them all, one by one, and noted where they had seated themselves. 11 of us, all told, with the lady miss entering the last, and seating herself upon a large divan near the wall, well over to one side. I could only see her head and shoulders from the bench. Olivia was over to my extreme right. Presumably she wanted to actually see my hands as well as listen to what they hoped to produce. Philip was, of course, front and center, facing me, along with the manager. The others were scattered hither and thither. It was early days for any of them, not already attached, to have come to know the other in a manner that made them natural and said company. This too would come, I reckoned, though perhaps Philip and I would not ourselves still be present to witness it. I hoped indeed that this would be the case, though of course not in any fashion morbid. When everyone was settled, Sarah arose and spoke from the back of the room. Miss Endicott is to me much more than a governess. Indeed, that role has been superseded by a more important one to Armand. But throughout, no matter her stated position and the gifts she has brought to it, she has been my mentor, in health, in mind, and in spirit. Her 5 years belies the age that separates us, for she is the womanly to which I yet aspire. Womanly, yes, in beauty to be sure, but more importantly in rationality and in practicality, all, so we are told, that the modern woman must master. And is this not mastery a mere halfway point, itself a sojourn to another kind of being, one whose womanhood is master of itself? Let us now witness one as beautiful to the way of such mastery. I share with you now Miss Laura Endicott. Laura? I had been taken flat aback by such sentiments. Given her position in the room, I could not observe just what her sister might have thought of Sarah's paean, but now I had something to live up to, and the more so, given that none of these others, including Philip, my goodness, had ever heard me strike a single note. Ahem. Well, then, my eternal gratitude to you, Sarah, my firm friend, and as well to same, the Lady Miss Montford. No scion of Armont in living memory has been better suited for such a role and title, none at all. Sarah's surf of hair had been swept over to one side. I caught myself from gasping at her sheer presence and attended the instrument. This time, nothing which I had prepared required a page-turner, so I began. Of course, today's piano was a very different instrument than had Mozart in his day. I depressed the pedal associated with a more clipped delivery. Oddly, I could not in that moment think of its technical name, though my foot found it where it should be, and thence delivered. The applause was gracious, as I was yet warming to my task. 3 short movements had the effect of focusing not only myself, but also my onlookers and listeners both. Then I immediately launched into the Chopin. These notes had, in fact, been written on kindred vehicle, and the grand piano now itself warmed to my work. Thus it was, and thus it had always been. Player, work, instrument. This would-be trio had to coalesce into one thing, if music at all should emanate therefrom. I was getting closer now, nearing that 3-in-1, which is, after all, the truer trinity. Now the applause was much louder, but also for some bemused and bewitched at the same time, for even Chopin might be a little new to some of the pair of ears afoot. Schubert would be the less so. The featured song was, after all, penned back, far back, in 1823, when Hargreaves himself must have been just my own age, if that could be imagined. As I sung it, I noted out of the very corner of my eye that Sarah had arisen, and looked as if she were having a vision. Now I myself felt some resonance of such disembodiment, for my eyes were abruptly afar, moving from my fingers to the instrument and thence outward across the room, straight toward her seraphimic face. Then it was gone, and I was back upon the bench once again, pushing away and breathing into the stanzas and lines. Whereupon, concluding, the applause spiced through with cheering led by Philip was for a moment almost deafening in spite of the tiny numbers. It must be the wine, damn it all. I lit into the song cycle now, its highlights chosen by the one beside me, but at the very point wherein Muller had prophesied the future species of man, Olivia had rushed up and by me in a torrid flash, and I actually had to halt my progress. There was a concerted gasp from the remainder of the audience, and the younger sister of Armont was out the door at top pace, and in that same moment Philip did bore his eyes into mine, and then I knew. It was his usual chivalry that saved me from toppling straight off the piano bench, but I had to instantly shake him off. Nevertheless, it was a matter of less than a minute, surely, racing up the stairs, and the two of us were just in sight of Olivia, who was screaming now, and pounding at the door to her father's chambers. "The door is locked," I panted out to Philip, who gave me a look of incomprehension. "Go to her, and tell her I have another way. Go!" I nigh on shouted this last word into his face, and he had paused right in the thick of it. But I knew, as I rushed away, tearing off my evening gown and casting into a bedraggled heap at the top of the grand staircase, that he would not do so again. My appearance must have startled the few others who had begun to emerge from the salon, but it could not be helped. I needed every range of motion, every possible advantage, if I were to win the day. Yes, this darkest of days, wherein all of those aforementioned regular angels would now be of no use, utterly no use at all. I had made for the library. Barreling in, I threw myself upon the corner of its giant mantelpiece and dug my fingers and thumbs into its intricate woodwork. Then the desired snap and click, and I was pulling with all my little might away at the huge bookcase. I grunted and then yelled near my topmost voice. There would be no more singing tonight in any case, I told myself as I squeezed into the blackness. No time for a candle. No, nothing but feel now. You can do this, girl. Stand and damn well deliver, you wretched bairn. I shall thrash every inch of your precious posterior, your personification of vanity. You horrid whore of a post-coital Babylon, you... My personal indictments continued apace, and then I found myself slamming my chin into the series of narrow steps which led up to the larger study on the third floor. I was expecting them, even so, and I tore up the lip of the first one, like some animal possessed of Promethean prescience. I wheeled round and burst through the seams of the portal to the second passage. My petticoats had gotten caught up in its own mechanism, and thus I tore them straight through and off, and then my vest as well. Thus further liberated, I sprinted along the thoroughly suffocating claustrophobic closet of the secret gallery, veered to my left and ran on, my dress boots clicking and clacking like an express run upon a set of endless segments of rail. I fell to my knees as I beheld the open cabinet door set above in the paneling, and without stopping my forward motion, dived through it as if I were diving into a lake. Flattened onto the parquet of the late master's bedchamber floor, I twisted myself, and without looking at what I already knew I would see, shot the bolt from the inside and helped fling an oncoming Olivia up upon the mattress. She herself screamed for strength as Philip was now himself up by her side. The two of them lifted her sister bodily off the canopy transverse and laid her down upon the very bed which had become over time her safest haven, her most adoring destination, her site of worshipful pilgrimage, her very father's bed, over which she had shot to join with him, and thus right his wrongful death at her very hands. "Get that off her neck!" But Olivia, whose powerful sinewy hands and arms had made Philip's eyes widen, had already torn the rope apart almost at its weave. The neck was bruised, but apparently unbroken. Then, to our combined amazement, Olivia began pounding her sister's chest, and then forcing open her mouth, breathing into it, nay, pushing air down its throat, and alternating between now this and now that in a maneuver I had never before seen. Philip made to halt Olivia, slamming her palms into her sister, but I stopped him. If I could believe that she could shoot, compose profound poetry, think beyond current thought, and by gods, kill. Yes, kill. Then should not this would-be God on earth also be able to save life, even, perhaps, to resurrect it? Her heart has started up again. She has a pulse. Philip had felt at Sarah's neck and looked back at me. For her part, the profusely perspiring Olivia had as well torn off most of her clothing and cast it adrift. She now mounted straight across her sister's torso and lifted up her hands in rarefied arc of a Sarah's yet somnolent form. "Come to us, angels of Chet and hoary countenance. Join with us as you would join with life itself. Come to me and enter my being. Be my soul, and with me bedamn all that has hitherto been damned. My best friends, my angels, come now to me and save the one I love, the only one. The only one." She had trailed off, her eyes transfixed by something that was not there, that could not be there. Philip had by this time backed away from the bedside. I started as now Hargreaves was with us, and I heard him gasp at what we then, the three of us, beheld. There was some kind of shadow now, encompassing Olivia and reaching down toward her sister. Olivia was herself seemingly without breath, and I had to again restrain Philip from intervening. We had done our bit for queen and country, as the saying goes, and I felt strongly that it was out of our hands, and perhaps beyond more than that. Then, just as I myself feared that we had lost the both of them to the everlasting void, Sarah coughed, spitting a little blood out of her lips, and then gasped for air. As soon as she had evened out her breath, her sister's intimidating form collapsed on top of her. Then I heard a voice, definitely emanating from Sarah's mouth, but somehow sounding more like that of her sister, yet not quite even that. "My love, oh my love, who are these beings? What are they? I breathe again. Oh, that it should have been you, and not our father, that I had loved, and in this very place. Yet I live, and thus you shalt also live." I felt tingles throughout my body, and then whatever was in possession of the scene had abruptly departed it. Olivia was pulling herself up and off her still-prone sister, all the while not taking her eyes from Sarah's. This latter's sparkling gems had been dulled, dimmed, and made dissolute by her attempt at self-annihilation, which had, to my senses, been within an inch of succeeding. Presently the entire household seemed in attendance in Hargreaves as ever, had the presence of mind to organize, sending a couple of servants out for the doctor and of course the driver, who was also the stableman as well. At some further length, with Philip holding me upright lest I simply fall to my knees in exhausted relief, I heard Sarah speak in her own voice. Raspy, yes, but absolutely recognizable. "Laura," she croaked out, making Olivia shake her head with a minor dismay. "Laura, you angel of daylight and of the sun, you have saved my life." I had no words, but did have the humility to point across to Olivia. I stayed my arm, just to emphasize this point. Sarah smiled up at her sister and reached up to caress her blemished cheek. Then she fell back in a half-swoon. It might well be weeks to recover from this perilous precipice, but somehow I knew that it would now never occur again. Something had altered the very space of the rooms in which we were yet standing. It had been cleansed. That was truly the only term that came to my mind to describe what I imagined I had witnessed. Yes, cleansed of its sin, by something beyond sin, something that Olivia had appeared to herself invoke and bring forth into our shared world. But that part of it was nonsense, surely, or perhaps not quite nonsense, for after all there was but nonsense, and then there was utter nonsense, and I knew, somewhere in the very depths of my being, that what had transpired before my supercharged senses had not been utterly a fraud. "How did you know of this thing over here? What in hell and damnation is it?" Olivia had by now recovered her usual demeanor. This alone told me that some things needed cleansing and others, at least according to the occluded druthers of the Union of Darkling Angels, or whatever they might be, did not. I discovered it by chance. Through that knowledge, however, I discovered all. I could say no more, given the additional company yet present, though now Smithy was directing, and Hargreaves had himself taken a couple of other staffers with him, telling them to prepare the sick room. Olivia nodded to me in fullest comprehension, eyeing the open panel behind her to her right. When only the four of us remained, I finally had the notion to show Olivia the bullet. With Philip lifting Sarah to her own rooms, I returned to what were now our shared ones and dug into my own riding jacket. Ha! I'll be damned. That was a bit of brilliant detective work upon your climbs, I dare say. Olivia almost never praised anyone, let alone myself, but this was not the time to preen, not with her sister clinging to life, and having not yet been visited by a doctor. I simply imagined myself in her place. You should also know that I brazenly and blatantly offered myself to your father when he was yet alive, in the hopes of weaning him away from your sister, so to speak. No, that is apt. Weaning, yes. Laura Endicott, I hereby release you from both my thrall, and from any thraldom the lands and persons of Arlmont had upon you. From this moment on, you are free and clear, and may dispense as your conscience dictates in any manner you see fit to chance. I gasped, then dipped to her almost automatically. She gave me a look of bewildered impatience and then strode out, said bullet in her hand. No doubt she would very discreetly dispose of it, just as she had already done with its... Oh, my dear God! I fell to my knees in my vision. Its subject, its very stuff, had knocked the proverbial stuffing out of me. I forced my eyes to remain open, lest I see the whole scene played out before me. The only thing to do was carry on. Olivia had liberated me, and so in turn I must do the same for her, and the only way in which I could do so was to maintain a silence, both absolute but also resolute. I found myself now by Sarah's own bedside, and she smiled weakly up to me. You saved my life after Livy killed to protect it. To what do I owe such fealty, such love? Why am I such, that those such as yourselves should immolate their persons unto me? I am nothing, and no one, and e'er shall be so. For what gent would marry a mad woman? You are not mad, dearest Sarah. Sweetest angel, silly thing, promise me upon your very soul, Sarah, my friend, that you shall not again endeavor to commingle life and death so finely. Sarah colored up deeply now, which was in itself a very good sign. Her blood was flowing, her lungs breathing, her heart pumping. Would her mind begin to think again? Yes, I felt as much. Would her spirit begin to... Well, what was the word here? I love you, Laura, and I thus release you. You and the handsome Philip go from this place, and perhaps never return unto it. I blinked and shook my head gently. I shall go, we shall go, but we shall not leave you until you are every inch the Lady Miss once again. No again about it, Laura, for it should be the first time. But I long for it now. Something has changed within me, or been changed. I know not how, only what. Sarah was too fatigued to continue, and that was as well, for as I sought to rise, here now was the doctor, accompanied by none other than Phipps. Peter! My gods, my friend! We embraced, which would have been amusing in almost any other circumstance. With that embrace I realized that I was in fact capable of making friends, which was, I suppose, my own version of some kind of vital transformation to which Sarah had just alluded. Her father's suicide must have played upon the poor girl's heart, yes? Yes. Thank the stars it did not get to play the funereal march. Doctor? Phipps had nodded gravely to me. I felt now nothing but a great sorrow for him, though he himself had clearly and successfully breasted the first woeful waves of mourning. I knew that shoreline all too well. There was no sand upon it, nay, not even a welcoming crevasse, wherein one was not lashed by wind and spray, cold and wet, and shivering and mewling, as I had been at 13, and as Sarah had so recently been. She will be right in time, the bruising will heal, and all of her vital functions seem to be almost normal. Her youth, I dare say, is what ultimately saved her. The only thing I would advise in such cases such as this is to monitor her moods, looking to the future. She is the lady of the house recently, I had heard. That is correct, I replied now. And you are, miss. I am the manageress of the estate, of late the governess, but that role has now been made moribund by the elder Miss Montford's ascension. The doctor gave me a bit of a hard stare at the use of such a term, no doubt appearing outlandish to the mind of an applied scientist. But presently he turned, one of the housemaids showed him out. Phipps lingered, and I took the minor liberty of inviting him to stay for the night. Miss Thorne awaits me, Laura, that is Emma, back at my residence. Of course. Oh, and good for you, Peter, and good on you, by the gods. He immediately picked up on my allusion. Lawrence is not only my friend. His friendship came about just as I had lost that of the late inspectors. It was a judgment call, I'll admit, but it was the right call, nonetheless. Yes, it was. There was nothing more to be said. Given that the momentarily dubious role of the manager was by far the very least in all that had occurred at Arlmont, the majority of it within the span of my brief tenure here, in a sense it was a non-issue. But I knew very well that the tip of the iceberg was yet the iceberg itself, and one could not, and never, detach the two things, whether in one's mind or in reality. And so, it very much mattered in the end what kind of iceberg one wanted floating around in one's sea of conscience. For some, the chill and chilling kind that sank the largest of vessels was just fine, thank you, a weapon to be launched, just as was the ship it would sunder. But for myself, at best, that same chill had to be found invigorating and challenging, even a reminder that one could come to a personal shipwreck, and then on downward, never to breathe again. Thank you for listening.